Well, thank God that's over. The Sacramento Kings finished their preseason 0-5, and I've been racking my brain trying to figure out what about this preseason has me so bothered when it doesn't matter. The wins and losses do not matter at all. Poof, goes away tomorrow. And I think I figured out what it is. I'll tell you on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And over the years, especially here on Locked On Kings, I've been labeled the optimist. Well, I'm going to need your help getting me back to my optimistic ways. Locked On Kings listeners, Kings fans, help me be and feel more optimistic about this Sacramento Kings preseason. Because even if the brain obviously tells me 0-5, who cares? Get them out of the way now. The numbers, who cares? The individual performances, who cares? It does not matter. It does not count. The Kings still have a fresh, clean slate come a week from tonight, next Thursday, their season opener against the Minnesota Timberwolves. That might all be true, and my brain understands that. But my heart is telling me, and my overall emotional state is telling me when watching this Sacramento Kings preseason that I needed to see something from this team. I needed something, and I did not get it. I did not come close to getting it. And I was trying to figure it out. Like, what is it specifically I needed to see? Was it DeMar DeRozan look like an absolute superstar? What was it that I needed to see? What did I need to come away with from this preseason? And I found the answer. I needed to be inspired by this team. Not inspired that this team can win a championship or anything of that nature, but inspired that this team was truly able and ready and prepared to take that next step in a very difficult Western Conference to ultimately get to where they have very publicly proclaimed they're trying to get to a 50-plus win team, making it back into the playoffs and making it out of the first round of the playoffs, right? That is what this team has labeled as their goals for this season. Plus, of course, every team's goal is to win a championship, and naturally, the Kings would love to get there too, but baby steps, right? I wanted to be inspired that this team off paper, because on paper, they look fantastic. Off paper, this team, I wanted to see, okay, this is different. And I didn't really see that. There were flashes. There were moments. But what about the last couple of weeks gives you confidence that the Sacramento Kings can make a big push in a very difficult Western Conference? Now, they absolutely still can. The jury's not out, right? Just because they didn't show us it in preseason doesn't mean we're not going to see it come regular season time. And a lot of you, whether you're in my comment sections or people I'm interacting with, whether it's on social media or in person, a lot of you are putting your eggs in that basket. And that might be for your own health and safety, and I understand that completely. A lot of you just believe that it will look, 100% will look different. A switch will be flipped. That's what people are, that term. A switch will be flipped. And a week from tonight, inside the Golden One Center, the Sacramento Kings will look way better than they did at any point during this preseason because the games actually matter at that point. And while I do agree that the Kings will certainly overall play harder in that game than they played at any point during the preseason because it matters. And it's only human nature to, like, think about it. When you have the opportunity to not give 100%, when you don't have to give 100%, you're not expected to give 100%. More often than not, you're not going to do it. That's all of us in whatever body of work that we're in or whatever situation we're in life. So do I think De'Aaron Fox, DeMar DeRozan, Domantas Sabonis, anybody really on this Kings roster gave 100% during this preseason? No, I do not. No, I do not. But I also don't believe that the basketball gods will wave their magical wand and come game one of the regular season, the Sacramento Kings will all of a sudden stop shooting horrendously from three-point range. I don't believe that the Sacramento Kings will all of a sudden play physical defense without fouling. I don't believe that the Sacramento Kings will all of the sudden figure out how to consistently play regardless of who they are playing against. And I don't know if I was going to get, in fact, I do know I was never going to get definitive answers to those questions in preseason because, again, it's preseason. And I've had a lot of people tell me if they had a great preseason, we'd be saying that they have to do it during the regular season. So if the shoe was on the other foot, right, we'd be saying that was great, but now we got to see it when it matters. They're correct, but at least we would have seen what great can potentially look like and get a glimpse of it. The most that we got was, I feel, the first quarter of game one inside the Golden One Center against the Golden State Warriors. That first quarter when DeMar DeRozan went like 6 of 6, Sacramento Kings came out of the gate. They weren't shooting the ball well from three-point range because they didn't really at any point throughout this entire preseason. But they were moving the basketball. They looked good. They were playing together. The starters looked really good. Malik Monk came in off the bench for his one stretch, played really well. It was like, yes, okay. That was our first taste, and it tasted good, and it looked good, and we're okay, that's something to build off of. But the problem is, the Kings went backwards. There were good moments, good blips along the way, like game 2 against the Golden State Warriors. The Kings fall down into an early hole. They're down by 10 points in the final couple minutes of the first quarter. Go on a run to cut that lead down to like 4 or 2 points. Driven by the starters. Great. Good glimpse in that moment. Keegan Murray got to the line 8 times in that game. Also had like 5 steals in that game. Awesome. Domantas Sabonis scored nearly 30 points, dominated in the first half against the Utah Jazz. Great. The Portland game we can throw completely out the window, and basically all of this LA Clippers game tonight, which I barely am mentioning and barely will mention because the Kings got embarrassed 113-91. These games were pretty much terrible. But overall, from where the Sacramento Kings started to where the Kings are right now, as the minutes went up for the top guys, not down. Granted, De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk did not play in tonight's game. But as the minutes went up, the Kings played worse. The point of the preseason is to build and ramp and prepare so you hit the regular season, like you hit the ground running, right? You don't go into it with cold feet. You experiment, you try things, you make adjustments, you hope to improve and build from there. And it just feels like this entire preseason, the Sacramento Kings just went in the complete opposite direction. Little gold stars along the road, but ultimately the road going in the wrong direction. That's what it feels like this preseason was. What did I want to see from this preseason? I wanted to get a good look at how dynamic and dangerous the offense can be. I got glimpses, but we never got to see even close to what it would look like because the Sacramento Kings could not hit a 3 to save their lives. And if it's 5 games where you're shooting this poorly from three-point range, I'm not convinced Kevin Huerter and Trey Lyles coming back is going to fix it, number one. And number two, 5 games shooting this badly, that's a pattern. If you want to call it a cold stretch, God, I hope you're right. But nobody outside of like Keegan Murray shot well from 3 in Utah, kinda. And Doug McDermott at least hit 4 of them tonight in his debut. We'll talk about him more later on in the show. But nobody shot the ball well at all from three-point range over the course of this preseason. And what did that show us? That when this Kings team is not hitting threes, it takes away a massive part of their offense. It makes them far more one-dimensional. And the Kings offense being one-dimensional takes away all of the strength and all of the, this isn't a word, but unguardability that I thought this roster would inherently have and gain with the addition of DeMar DeRozan. Teams were daring the Kings to shoot threes and just crowding the paint and making sure that DeRozan and Fox and Sabonis couldn't get comfortable inside the arc, and nobody was making them pay for it. If the Kings offense can't make a team defense pay for that kind of risk that they're taking, then you're cutting the legs out from underneath what should make you a dynamic and terrifying offense to go up against. Again, all of this can be fixed, and hopefully all of it will be fixed come the start of the regular season. But the point is, the Kings, if you believe the Kings will play better, I'm with you. The thing is, over the next week, it has to be way better. Like way better. Or the Kings are going to get rolled by Minnesota opening night of the season. If they play even a little bit like this, they're going to lose. And I'm of the belief that while starting the season slow is not the end of the world for the Kings, as they proved 2 years ago when they went 0-4 and still made the playoffs, if the Kings don't take advantage of the opportunity to jump on some of these teams early, Minnesota is incorporating new guys. The Lakers are worried about playing and keeping their guys as healthy and ready as possible in April, May, and June, right? If you don't jump on these teams early, you might have lost an advantage. And if you put yourself, even if it's a small hold to begin with, those losses compound, build upon each other, and all of a sudden we're in April and we're looking at the Kings fighting to stay above the play-in picture and looking back to the start of the season and going, man, if only the Kings were more ready to play, more ready to go and picked up a game here or there early on. That's the concern that I have with this group. You wanted to see this team make adjustments and improve over the course of this preseason. They did not do it. The theme of this preseason is it's just preseason. It doesn't matter. That's the theme of this preseason. If that's the theme of the preseason, that means the preseason did not go well. And what I'm hoping is that this preseason wasn't just a colossal waste of time. So the Kings got a lot of work to do over the next week. But there were some positives. There were positives to take away from this preseason. I'll share with you the list of positives that I did put together. We'll talk about each one. So this is not just a doom and gloom podcast. Talk about Kevin Huerter did not play in tonight's game. I'm a little disappointed with that. Doug McDermott did play and was okay in his debut. And we're hoping for some good news about Trey Lyles very, very soon. That's all to come here on the Locked On Kings podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Hims. Guys, ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom? It's time you stopped worrying about your performance and for you to get Hims so you can feel confident knowing that you can get hard and stay hard whenever you are in the mood. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra, Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, and there's no need for those uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. Hims.com/lockedon. This product mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription is required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. I hate being a negative guy. And no, this is not a doom and gloom podcast. There's no... It might sound like it or feel like it, and I hope you don't take this away from the podcast. There's nothing about this preseason and where the Sacramento Kings are at right now that has me hitting any sort of panic button. I just ultimately did not see really much of anything I was hoping to see. I'm leaving this preseason uninspired and disappointed, not angry, terrified, and hopeless. Right. Very, very different things. That's not where I'm at. And I think the vast majority of Sacramento Kings fans who are negative and unhappy about this preseason are in the same boat. As much as you want to yell at them or type at them, it's preseason, bro, relax, chill. It doesn't matter. As much as you want to say that to people, it doesn't make up for the fact that what we saw was generally gross, right? This preseason was pretty much awful. The Kings did not look good for more than a handful of moments and stretches in games. And like I said in the last segment, it felt like it just got worse and worse and worse over time when you want to be moving in the opposite direction. That being said, there were positives from this preseason. And I put together a list of positives, put it out there to be vetted by Sacramento Kings fans on social media, and they helped add a couple more positives that I had initially missed. But here's the list of positives from this preseason that I think should be laid out and should be talked about, because this wasn't a just negative, doom and gloom, awful preseason where nothing good happened. Offensive rebounding and second chance points were a focus of the Sacramento Kings going into this preseason, and for the most part, they did a really solid job this preseason. I thought they did a good job crashing the offensive glass, clearly showing that that's an emphasis of theirs, clearly working on that, workshopping it, finding the right times to crash, when to not crash, and it resulted in way more second chance points. Now, I got some sarcastic responses to that saying, Matt, the Kings got more offensive rebounds because they were missing more shots. Okay, what would you rather have them do? Watch the ball come off the rim and get back on defense and not have an opportunity for second chance points? Hell, in some of these games, even when they lost, their second chance points is what in many ways kept them in the game a little bit. So regardless of if you make or miss a shot, you should always be crashing and getting ready and building those habits of, like Mike talks about this a lot, Mike Brown. Do it every single play. Crash. Even if the ball goes in, doesn't matter. You're still in the right position. I felt the Kings were building those habits during preseason, and we saw that, and that was positive. Another positive for the Kings is they talk about offensive pace. Last year, it felt like the Kings were not getting out in transition as much as they should. This preseason, you could tell that getting out in transition and fast break scoring was a clear point of emphasis. That got significantly better. I already brought this up a little bit earlier, but Domantas Sabonis' game against the Utah Jazz, right? I thought very, very good. I know the vast majority of his scoring in that game came in the first half, but Sabonis nearly put up a 30-point game, had a monstrous double-double, including a lot of offensive rebounds. And even in tonight's game, if you're just looking at the numbers, outside of his turnovers, he had 6 of them tonight. Yikes. 24 points, 7 of 14 from the field. I really like 10 of 12 from the free throw line. 9 rebounds, 5 assists, a couple steals. So Sabonis had a good stat line tonight. The game itself was awful, but Sabonis has had a couple of performances in this preseason that were solid, that made you feel pretty good. And the expectation is for Sabonis to get right back to his double-double and even flirting with triple-double ways, I expect, by next Thursday. I already talked about this too, the start to game 1, right? How the Kings started the first game of the preseason, how the starters looked together. DeMar DeRozan hitting everything he was putting up. Everybody sharing shots and not one or two guys just taking all the shots. I thought the first, 10 minutes of the preseason was the best part of the preseason. Everything else after that was not great. But the first 10 minutes of the preseason I thought was really, really, really good. And if you want to latch onto those 10 minutes and latch onto really that first half of game 1 and just hold on to that tightly and say, this is the only thing I care about from preseason, all power to you. I wish I could do that. I thought Jordan McLaughlin overall. Jordan McLaughlin got the start for De'Aaron Fox tonight. Didn't play great. But overall, that's a very completely different role from what Jordan is going to have with this Kings team. Overall, I thought Jordan McLaughlin looked really solid in the role that he is going to play. Came back from injury, gave the Kings a nice, needed reinforcement boost. And I'm excited to see what Jordan McLaughlin looks like as a consistent part of the Kings rotation this season. I thought Keegan Murray was clearly aggressive on the offensive end of the ball. Now, he was not shooting well, like everybody was not shooting well. But Keegan was looking to put the ball on the floor, looking to attack the basket, trying to get to the free throw line, looking for that mid-range jumper. Year 3, and Keegan Murray looks like he's figuring more out and understanding more of how he can score outside of just catch and shoot, which is ultimately what the Kings have been asking for him. That's what they really needed from him last season before DeMar DeRozan was here. And the fact that DeMar is now here and that didn't take away from Keegan showing that growth, I think is an absolute sign of positivity. I thought the Kings' ball pressure for most of this preseason has been really, really good. They've generated a lot of steals and a lot of deflections. Deflections is a kind of an underrated stat in the NBA that's being tracked and talked about more and more and more. Creating deflections, even if it doesn't result in a steal, when you deflect the ball, you disrupt an offense, right? Deflecting a pass just means that a team can't execute their offensive flow nearly as well as they normally can. Even if you deflect the ball and it goes into the hands of someone else and it results in a bucket, they had to work differently to get those shots versus smoothly working the ball around the perimeter, getting the ball to their certain spots in their sets, and then scoring like the way they do in a walkthrough during practice. So deflections are a big deal, and Sacramento Kings were amongst the top of the league in deflections during this preseason, which is a great thing. So there's a list right there of positives from preseason to take away from. I mean, it's a positive that Kevin Huerter is back and has been cleared for full contact. I'm disappointed that we didn't get to see Kevin Huerter tonight. Now, to be clear, I don't think this was a Mike Brown decision. And I'm going based off of Mike Brown's words in saying that. Because Mike shared with us when we talked to him, was it earlier this week or last week? They're all blending together. When we talked to Mike earlier in preseason, he talked about how he's basically just waiting for the medical staff to give him the go-ahead and say, hey, Kevin Huerter's ready to go, green light, he can play. If Mike didn't get that green light tonight, then Mike didn't play him. But if Mike was given the green light and he said, you know what, no, I'm not going to play him and I'm not going to play Fox and Monk either because what's the point? It's whatever. We don't want to risk injuring him. I'm not the biggest fan of that because I would like to have seen not just as great as it would be just selfishly to see Kevin Huerter play basketball again, of course. I wish he had gotten some in-game action before the regular season, right? Now, if he wasn't ready to go, he wasn't ready to go, and that's fine. But I was hoping that we would get a glimpse of it, and that now means like this next week, the next 6 days for the Kings are super, super important period towards ramping up and fixing a lot of the mistakes, or if they have this box of classified sets and classified things that they didn't showcase at all during preseason, they better hit those things hard and come out with a bunch of things we didn't see game 1 against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping there's a lot of aces up the sleeves of Mike Brown and the Kings coaching staff and the Kings players that they're going to show us in front of a sold-out Golden One Center on next Thursday. But the next week, it's going to be really important for Kevin Huerter too, because if Kevin Huerter is going to be ready to go, and I think the Kings are expecting he will play, I mean, as far as I understand, the belief is Kevin Huerter will play game 1, then this next week is going to be essential for him, not just building the conditioning, but building the confidence that he can play the way he wants to play with that shoulder. So I was disappointed not to see him. And now I think it's clear, like he's coming off the bench, right? They're like, even if this preseason didn't go great, Keon Ellis is not to blame for this preseason. Keon didn't look particularly great for much of this preseason too. Like I just don't see a world where, Kevin Huerter's cleared. He's good to go. He's playing game 1. Keon, you're coming off the bench. Huerter's right back in the starting lineup. If it happens, okay, I'll be surprised. And I don't think at this point that would be the right decision for anybody. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast, like we said at the top of the show, is also brought to you by FanDuel. NBA fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get the hunch in the middle of a game, whether it's a Kings game or any game, and not just basketball as well, an NFL game, college football action, the WNBA playoffs, whatever it is, when you're watching a game and you get that hunch, you have a feeling, okay, I think I know how this game's going to go, or I think this person's going to get this shot, or this person's going to have this many points, or whatever. You just start getting a feeling, right? Go to FanDuel, because the same place that you can place your bets, you'll get latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. It's all right there in front of you for you to make the most informed decision. And when you start with when you place your first $5 bet and start on FanDuel, you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. No questions asked. No matter what happens with that $5 bet, you could make a super simple, easy bet that only wins you a dollar or even less than that. Doesn't matter. Or you could risk it all on a high risk bet that more than likely won't pay out, because even if you lose, hey, here's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's all on FanDuel.com. If you missed my last episode where I had the privilege and pleasure of having Jerry Reynolds, Sacramento Kings legend, on the show, go and check that out. But if you did catch it, you probably noticed the little intro video that I had, or little message at the very beginning of the podcast, where I shared with you that while I was recording that pod with Jerry, the Doug McDermott to Sacramento news broke, and I didn't see it. at all. I was locked into my conversation with Jerry. So I didn't touch on Doug McDermott at all in that episode. I'll touch on it today. Plus, we got to see Doug play tonight for the Kings inside the Intuit Dome. And so first, I'll talk about the signing first. I really like the signing for the Kings. I think it makes a ton of sense, right? You're struggling with shooting. You need kind of bigger wing bodies that can space the floor and shoot when they're out there with DeRozan and Fox and Sabonis. Doug McDermott makes a ton of sense. He makes a ton of sense. And really, like, I'm taking that a step further because it's not just Doug, right? Every move this summer that Monte McNair has made, or I should say every kind of prominent move. I don't include like the offering training camp contracts to guys that are trying to fight to make a roster. It just screams offense, 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 offense. Monte McNair is an analytical guy. He's analytics driven. That is his background from his time with Daryl Morey and the Houston Rockets. He's risen through the ranks as an analytics guy. So this guy doesn't just make decisions based off of a whim or how he's feeling. The fact that all these primary moves that the Sacramento Kings continue to make all are offensively driven. Doug McDermott is not addressing the Kings' defensive issues. DeMar DeRozan, not even close to addressing the Kings' defensive issues. Bringing back Malik Monk doesn't help the Kings' defensive issues, right? The Kings are continuing, and their front office with this roster is continuing to emphasize offense. The message is clear. The best version of the Sacramento Kings, as it stands, is offensive driven, not defensive driven. Doug McDermott is another example of that. And tonight we got our first look at Doug McBuckets, and he had 14 points on 4 of 11 from three-point range. Hey, get him up, Doug. Shoot him. Like Mike Brown is known as a coach that if you don't shoot him, if you pass up open threes, you'll get benched for it. Doug, what I love is like Doug came into this game, just got a job a couple days ago or a day ago, and he comes in and he shoots without fear. Gets a lot of looks, takes them. That is what he's doing here. That is his job here. When he is on the floor, the only thing that Doug McDermott cannot do is hesitate to shoot. Because if he's not doing that, he's not doing anything for you. Now, to be fair, he had 5 rebounds tonight, and he's good at, I mean, Mike Brown expects everybody to help crash the glass and have an impact in some way outside of just scoring. But Doug McDermott is here to space the floor and knock down open shots, and at the very least, take open shots when he gets them. So that's what he did tonight. Do I wish the percentage was better? 100%. Some of the shots that he took, I was like, oh, yikes. But overall, like, this is what he's here for. It's what we saw him try and what we saw him do in his first game. So I'm certainly not too bothered by any of that. Tomorrow is the 3-week mark from the injury report that we got back in September 27th. And it said that Trey Lyles would be reevaluated in approximately 3 weeks. So the window of that reevaluation for Trey, at least with the plan for Trey, is right now. When Jordan McLaughlin got reevaluated, he was cleared and ready to go right away. Kevin Huerter got to his reevaluated date and he was cleared. He hasn't played yet, but he was cleared immediately. God, I'm hoping in the next couple of days we hear Trey Lyles is good to go. He'll be ready to play, and he can get back to full practice over this next week and be ready to help reinforce that Kings bench against Minnesota on Thursday. God, I hope the Kings need Trey Lyles. Trey Lyles is a very, very important piece of this team. So, of course, if we get any news, any information about Trey and his status, I'll share that for you here on Locked On Kings. I'll share it on my socials at Matt George Sack. So go and check it out there. And if you want to weigh in on this preseason, are you like me where you're feeling disappointed, you're uninspired, or maybe you're on the other side where you're on the mat, chill, it's just preseason crowd and you're not too worried? I wish I felt that way. I don't, but that doesn't mean that you have to feel any kind of way or you have to feel the same way I feel. Let's talk about it at Matt George Sack on Twitter, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com if you want to email me. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, hop in the conversation in the YouTube comment section down below. Over the next week, we will be watching closely in whatever practice access we get. What looks different? Because now it's the real deal, right? now, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but like all the Jones players, right? The two-way guys, the Scalabissiers, like these guys, like training camp was your opportunity. A lot of you are going to Stockton or are going to be out of a job. I don't know. The two-way guys, learn as much as you can. Try and become the next Keon Ellis, but this team has expectations, and this team needs to be ready to go. So kind of the fun and the experimenting is over, right? It's done. Tonight was the last night. Science projects end. Now it's know what you do best and do it and go out and execute. That starts tomorrow. The good news is we wake up tomorrow morning and none of the preseason matters. It all goes away. Preseason's over. But the context of the preseason will linger with us. And unfortunately, the context of the preseason was not great. Not great. And hopefully it's all a distant memory. Hopefully I'm able to go back to these podcasts and go back to my tweets during preseason come the end of Thursday night after a Kings victory against the Timberwolves where they look great. And I'm able to laugh and go, oh, you overreacting POS. I really hope that's the case. I have no problem pointing at myself and laughing at myself with that. But as of right now, I need to see the Sacramento Kings need to look a lot different on Thursday night if they're going to beat the Minnesota Timberwolves to open up their season 1-0. They need to look a lot different. And I was hoping I wouldn't have to say that. I didn't expect to have to say that at the end of the preseason. But we'll see. It gets real now. And of course, the build up to game 1, every single game throughout the season, hopefully into the playoffs. Locked On Kings has got you covered this year. So I appreciate you spending your time here on the podcast. If you're new, welcome. I hope you enjoy this season with us. If you're with me for another season, hey, we're on the roller coaster again together. Let's enjoy the ride. Until next time, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.